Welcome. This is our first webinar of the Value Department that Katrine Schoendorff and I host together. And we're really excited to welcome Paul Hobcraft, innovation strategist, ecosystem architect, and self-described innovation journeyman, to our first webinar. Paul has spent over 20 years advancing innovation in all its forms, from global turnarounds to mentoring a broad range of businesses and government organizations. He brings hard-won insights into what we actually makes ecosystems work and where they can break down. In this session, we'll talk about the real challenges of building ecosystem collaborations and what mid-sized companies can learn from the mindset shifts and missed opportunities of the past. Rather than spotlighting individual failed alliances, we'll explore the general patterns and lessons that emerge when organizations don't adopt ecosystem thinking or fail to act on it. You'll hear hear why some efforts fall short, not because of intent, but because of unclear collaboration dynamics, misaligned incentives, and the need to better define roles and relationships in the ecosystem. Well, a quick note on the format. We'll begin the webinar with a series of questions over the course of the next 30 to 35 minutes. If you have questions for Paul during the session, please drop them in the comment section. We will reserve some time at the end to bring your questions into the conversation and give Paul the opportunity to respond directly.
Welcome. Welcome Paul. And let me start with the very first question. What is the first mindset shift a leader needs to make to truly work in an ecosystem?
Firstly, thank you for having me. Just so a number of other people understand, I'm not on my computer like I'd like to be. I had to get to my phone because Windows decided to interrupt at the very last minute and give me an update. So I've come off the ceiling. That's why you can see the ceiling above my head. Now, to answer your question, firstly, I'm looking forward to this whole session. I've made it in a way that I hope gives a lot of people a lot of different ideas and a lot of thought. So when you ask the first question about what does a leader need in his first mindset shift, firstly, I think you have to ask, are they reflective or are they reactive? That I think is the first point. But the key for me was something I thought about and I said, right, is it a sense of loss or over a sense of gain? Now, the reason I asked that of a leader is because whenever you're going through a change of this magnitude, as ecosystems would be, they're giving up things and they're gaining things. But are they thinking in the mindset to recognize that it's all not going to be gain, it's going to be loss as well? So from my point of view, that question of it's a sense of loss over a sense of gain becomes my first mindset shift, because that will tell me what type of change they have within themselves. For instance, what type of problems they're dealing with, what's their fears of, are they missing out on things? It starts to trigger their belief. It starts to trigger their positioning. And I think it sort of gives a much better ability to open up and say, well, where are you on system thinking, for example? Where are you on curiosity? How do you regard shared value? And I'll give you a couple of quotes, if I may, which I would again give to a leader. I'd say, we are called to be architects of the future, not its victims, which is Buckminster Fuller. And it means that you as a leader, you are an architect and you have to think of the future. Come out of the today, worry about your future, worry about where you're going as a company. The second quote is, our current pathway keeps us trapped. We are operating within systems designed for a world no longer existing. Now, that will prompt questions and answers obviously come out of that is because most of people's systems are built for the last century. Most of our innovation processes are last century invented. We haven't thought differently. Ecosystems, innovation ecosystems, are the way forward to give a much better answer to dealing with complexity, dealing with change, and obviously recognizing it's going to be a lot more dynamic. It's going to have a lot more potential for a value capture, for innovation and market growth. To answer your first question, sense of loss over sense of gain.
Mhm.
That's a very nice, actually, summary of it, because I hear you say like architect of the future. So yeah, thinking about what you want to actually gain, but at the same time understand that the world is no longer existing, so you have to give up something. So that's very nice, and also bringing problems forward and what are the fears, and not just FOMO, but really see what are the opportunities. So Paul, also you described ecosystems as a balancing of between competition and collaboration. How do organizations avoid what we call collaboration theater, where partnerships look good on paper but fail to drive real innovation?
I think one has to, again, do a couple of triggering points here in our thinking. Many companies have learnt about open innovation and what it can give. They've applied that to supply chains. They've applied that to a number of other aspects, but usually in a rather limited way. I would argue maybe there's a time now for us to move to open innovation ecosystems. Now, what would those give over the existing? It opens up our thinking far more to a collaborative environment. A more sharing environment is what we're looking for. We're looking for a lot more greater value creation. It's not just a one-way flow. We're looking for a multiple backwards and forwards flow from people. We're all starting to say, well, we've got to push away from our existing traps that we're in, which is either a particular marketplace, and we need to push beyond our borders. Do we push beyond our borders in the collaborative spaces that we're currently running, and they're rather narrow, or do we throw that open and say, can it become more competitive? Now, competitive collaborations are not as hairy and big and worrying as you might think. We actually need collaborations in new standards, because our existing standards are not fit for purpose when it comes to technology change, etc. We also need to recognize there is a constant change of regulations. Do we fight that on our own behalf, or do we fight that collaboratively with competitors? I take, for example, the energy system. The grid needs an enormous amount of collaboration, and it needs it from your competitor, because one utility moves its power to the next utility, etc., etc. If we don't have a commonality, if we don't have an understanding, if we don't have a sharing of how we build our grids going forward in the future, how we collaborate, how we build our standards, we're going to have major problems. Same with nuclear. If nuclear takes shape and form in the way that some are arguing, nuclear is what? Is it going to be huge? Is it going to be modular? We need to get our competitors in a collaborative environment so we can benefit from their knowledge and our knowledge. The other part of what I think bringing competitors in to your collaboration, which is very, very close to your heart, Catherine, which is circular movement. We need to actually recognize that by working with our competitors, we can build a much more sustaining future, because we're all on that particular path. So my sum up here is we're all very interconnected and we're all very interdependent. And to answer your point about, is it theatre or is it not? No, I think we're in a world where if one gets into these new standards, into these changing regulations, we cannot afford to be in theatre because it gets more and more transparent. And I think my view back of, how we break down barriers, how we connect and offer that connecting, how do we get our customers into this? Because they are frustrated when we don't connect everything up, because they want better, richer experiences. We do a lot better if we had collaborated with some of our competitors here. So it combines, it spreads risks, it builds more sustaining products.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that not only our customers, but also everyone, we all need to solve the challenges we're facing together. So I love also the approach that you have, the collaborative environment. When we prepared this, our discussion, you said also that ecosystems grow in stages. Can you maybe share with us a case where a company successfully scaled from maybe a niche player to an ecosystem orchestrator?
Absolutely. I mean, I have lots. And I will move through three or four actually, to get to a point of saying, oh, I can relate to this for a number of reasons, and I'll explain as we go. Number one is Apple. Now, Apple has been around for a very long time, but it started off as a very niche supplier of computers, the Macintosh. It then went into iPod. It then went into iTunes. But the big breakthrough, the one that basically became the inflection point, was the iPhone, 2007. So you imagine how long ago that was. They've moved from there into clouds, into platform applications, wearables, home devices. They're starting to orchestrate their whole aspect. The stages are not sometimes the stages we think we're going to be moving towards. But if we don't attempt this in stages, we might miss out of a lot of things that are rapidly evolving around us. So Apple, I think, is a good example. Amazon is another example. It was an online bookstore. It then moved into being the Amazon marketplace. Today, it's got logistic networks, fulfillment, media, pharmacy, grocery, healthcare, you name it. None of that was much of that was not subscribed. It actually evolved through these stages of learning. And that, I think, is why I say it is stages, because it is stages of learning. We have time. And these are quite old in some respects, but I'll give you a couple of new ones. We have complexity and we have leadership changes. We have technology coming in, evolution. We have a different way of thinking and learning, more dynamic than static. We're gaining more and more mastery by if we take things at stages and we learn things. Let me take two companies in Europe, Octopus Energy. You may not have heard of them. They are a UK company. They started in 2015. Their rationale of being a business is we want to disrupt the traditional industry of energy. We want to bring in renewables. But again, it's a massive chunk and bite of ambition. So they've said, right, we will go, we'll learn first about smart grids. We'll be able to contribute and work with utilities. We'll start thinking about what tech-driven ecosystems will do for people. How do we actually drive down our costs to make them more competitive than the competitors that one would naturally go to? All of these are steps. Scaling is incredibly hard work. And to address this evolution, You have to knock down fears, you have to knock down barriers, but you also have to have visions. Visions change. Again, Apple's vision changed when, our friend passed away and it was passed on to somebody else. A very, very different mindset, but the evolution that took place. So we have to be careful. So I think when we scale from a niche to an orchestrator, it does take time. It has significant advantage, but we are seeing today quite a lot of smaller companies recognizing the opportunity doesn't lie in a product or in a service, but in building the ecosystem of product and services. And I think this is the next sort of, as we move along, we will start looking and explaining that. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Fully.
Mhm.
And what I think is really interesting also what you state, there are stages, you never really can have a fixed path to something because you can think of it, but you have such a dynamic world. So it's more about like doing what you're doing, be curious, learning from it, and then see the opportunities to move forward to it. And what I think is really nice also that you say, it's also now becoming more and more interesting for the smaller companies because normally what we hear is always like, yeah, but that's for the big players. But you stress basically that it's also not the case. It's really available for them. So what is then required from them? The mindset shift that helps them to realize that ecosystems are actually already within their reach.
Isn't it sometimes fun? You're coming on to an event and you're going to be discussing things, and up pops a fabulous piece of research just coming out of, in this case, McKinsey, and you think, oh, I have to use that. It helps in what I was arguing with, and they're basically talking about mid-sized firms. So credit goes where credit's needed, which is, many mid-sized companies have got very distinct technologies. Look at German Mittelstand, or it's very, very distinct. They've got widely respected products, many mid-sized companies, and these are 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion, 5 billion companies. They've got strong reputation and brands, and they're highly specialized. Now, that's an argument sometimes for rigidity. If I'm good at what I'm doing, why do I need to change?
Mhm.
And the mid firm is faced now with a very difficult moment, which is to say, I've got to consider a set of problems. And I say McKinsey did a nice job of analyzing some of those, which is there's a very uncertain growth prospect ahead for most companies, all companies, and mid-sized companies are going to be even more vulnerable than maybe the bigger size. Who knows? The geopolitical turbulence, supply chain concerns. Who's going to get the supply chains if they're scarce? Is it going to be the big player or is it going to be the medium-sized player? Who's going to lay in I'll give you 3 months orders straight away. The mid-sized player maybe can't do that, but he's got to think about doing that in the future. He's got far more limited access to capital and talent, and he's not so good at the digital and data analysis that goes on, because why does he need to be? I've got my set customers, they're happy, I'm happy. Why do I need to think any differently? Big rethink needs to happen, which is, it's getting very worrying that a competitor sitting in Germany, if he's ignoring the Chinese competitor, is in serious problem. So he's got to find ways to collaborate. He's got to find ways to mitigate risk. And to do that, he most probably says, well, maybe I've got to find people that are in a common sort of thinking as I am, can see some of these fears ahead. We need to get into more of a collaborative environment. We need to start thinking ecosystems. It doesn't have to be for a product. It could actually be for the way we construct ourselves and are able to appeal to to the banks, how we appeal to suppliers, because we're a stronger alliance of mid-sized firms. They can be able to most probably transform quicker today, or can they? By bringing in maybe a more transformative way of through ecosystems, they're going to be pushed a lot more. They're going to have a lot more knowledge, they're going to have a lot more intelligence coming their way from other people, questioning and answering. The mid-sized firm ignores much of the world because it gets on with itself. What we've got to recognize and we've got to bring them into is the world isn't ignoring you, it's actually challenging you, and it needs you to come in. So they've got isolated linear models. There's a risk mitigation that they've got to think about now than they've ever thought about. And collaborative work becomes increasingly the key for them to do that.
And it is about challenging others, and challenge is always an opportunity, isn't it? And when we look at Alibaba Salesforce, how can SMEs go beyond that name dropping? What should they look after or look under the hood of such ecosystems and learn from that?
Yeah, what Salesforce, Alibaba, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, you could say there's one clear thread running through it, and that's technology. We're clear on that. Technology has made a huge difference to how a company moves forwards and grows. I did a very significant piece of research recently, and I'm pulling out that piece of research, and I pulled out the Salesforce one. How they break down ecosystems, and I'll run through it very, very quickly. They recognize the core platform components that they need to have in that. They recognize the infrastructure layers. They recognize the development layers. And they say, I want to bring that into my business model evolution, which in this case is CRM. They started CRM in 1999. Actually, I was at one of the first conferences of Salesforce at the time. And they said, right, we're going to basically do sales automation. We're going to do cloud offering. We're going to do customization. Then they evolved. They said, we need to do platform play. We need to do enterprise expansion. So what's coming under the hood for the person is to say, well, if I want to solve my problems with customer relationships, I'm going to look far better at Salesforce, who is evolving in a very modern, realistic, interconnected way than most probably if I go and buy a piece of software off the shelf. And because they continue to enterprise expand through cloud, they bring in a big move, which is the digital headquarters, which is about 2018. They got into platform economics. So they said, we're going to give you an app exchange. We're going to give you openness to our whole network. We're going to offer you 10, 12 different revenue streams that will open up your thinking to your customer relationship management. We will provide you many control points, so you don't have to worry about much of this. We will put the control in our place. We will do the governance. We'll do the repository. We'll do the Apple Exchange work. So suddenly it was like, oh, my customer relationship management, I can do it through one person. Now, we need to give you a lot more ecosystem partners. We need to actually build out your whole innovation areas and your thinking and how you do things, because we're learning all the time. And in our data and in our analysis, we're giving you that opportunity in new products and new services. And we will continually move ahead of everybody else to give you first mover advantage if you want to tap into that. And they've gone into such growth strategies. I mean, you know, people automatically now say, well, if I'm about to launch a health project, I've got to look at Salesforce and their health project software, or I've got to look at one or two others. So under the hood is what somebody like Salesforce has been able to evolve and build over the last 20, 30 years to give people just constantly added value. And same is with any of these other ones one can use. Doesn't matter if it's Apple, Amazon, Alibaba, you name it. They've all continually layered on value, given security, grown the trust. And it's amazing me because you look at the size of these companies now, they're into their billions because of the way that they've approached this. So it's a very interesting one, this niche to orchestrator, how long that took. And then it's not name dropping. It's actually saying, I've got to find the right name and the right brand to be able to make my business happen and work.
Can I just summarize it? Because I mean, that is really, really interesting. So what you're saying is basically leverage and use other orchestrators where they are the best for you to build to evolve your niche, and then to find your own spot and become an orchestrator in your specific area, correct?
Yeah. I mean, because there's a couple of examples in Germany. I was just looking for the piece of paper, which is there's a company in France called Alma, and there's a company in Germany called Campo Group. They're both in healthcare. They're both taking a particular regional approach or a national approach, but what they've recognized is they need Salesforce in there to give them the CRM ability to actually connect in. And then they will go to somebody else and say, you're my data connectivity side. And then they go to somebody else and they then work with them to build out. So they've got an ecosystem and they're growing their ecosystem, but they're growing it through the utilization of multiple bigger ecosystems out there. And it's the natural way it grows.
Thank you.
And that's very interesting because it also really, at least how I interpreted it, the focus is also on the customer and really wanted to find providing value and then actually on the best way in combining and collaboration with others. And what you also see is normally a lot of companies, they're still focused on short-term, focused what is on the next quarter and when I want to make a profit, not thinking about starting with a value. Normally, also what I experienced is that a mid-sized level manager sees the opportunity, but has to sell it upwards. Do you have some tips, tricks, some insights how actually they can support that the ecosystem approach upwards to help them?
I have a fun one on this. I'm going to give you 6 quotes. Okay. Quote 1 is on collaboration and innovation. It opens up the thinking to a richer diversity of experience, knowledge, and approach. I'm selling up to the top manager, the mid manager, on what he should be saying. Number 1, collaboration, innovation. Number 2, through ecosystems, you can get more optimization and efficiency. Real-time information exchange leads to improved efficiency, cost saving, and market responsive. My third point of selling up to you, Mr. Manager, is my new market and revenue streams. It opens up thinking to opportunities not so easily possible by one organization alone. My point 4 is I enhance customer experiences through ecosystems. Customers are looking today for resolutions to their complexity, which one enterprise often just cannot handle or satisfy. We need a connected system tailored to their personal needs. Ecosystems provide that. My point 5, sir, if you allow me to, is scale and agility. Common platforms enable knowledge to flow. They build interconnected capacity and readily are able for rapid scaling for response to changing market dynamics. Number 6, before you throw me out the office, sir, is risk sharing and cost reduction. Through a collective network, a collaborative network, you gain better insights and knowledge. You're able to reduce the load simply because you've got risk mitigation between all the people in it. You're getting a greater diversity, but you're also getting a greater level of synergies that can come out of this risk sharing and cost reduction. So from my point of view, selling it up to you, we need to think through these 6 points, and then you should say, can we see that for ourselves? And how do we then set about and do it as a team to make sure you, as the leader, have this balance between shared loss and shared gain?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm looking at the time. I would say, there's Carlos Zwicker was asking, Paul, can you supply the link to the McKinsey report you mentioned earlier?
Oh, you've opened up the door. Lovely. Can I supply a few links?
Sure.
One is obviously to McKinsey, but I will supply a link to each of my different sort of blogs or websites, because there's on those a huge range of things. But what I will do is particularly link it to like a mid-sized post I did about giving structure for a mid-sized company, how they can think through that, or putting forward a business case to a manager. I'll put up 2 or 3 of those links alongside the McKinsey one. I will do that.
That would be terrific. I mean, excellent. And I have a last question. If we fast forward now, we are in 2035. What ecosystem trend will we regret ignoring?
I suppose if you'd have asked me that question 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, it might have been a very different story. I mean, we're all at the moment in the sort of thrall, fear, worries of what tariffs are going to do and how they're going to change our world. It could be a radically different world. Are we in the next industrial revolution simply because we're going to have to get away from our global collaborative one? If that is the case, that is a 10-year horizon minimum. So one could argue that. What do I regret myself is we have become very static organizations. What I would love to see within the next 5 to 10 years is we've actually got hold of the dynamics within dynamic ecosystem and recognize what that gives us in adaptivity, in flow, in resilience, in being able to challenge. So for me, becoming more of a dynamic environment that we operate in, and we can do that far better in ecosystems than we can in siloed systems, we begin to move away from the staticness that we've all had to deal with over the last 10 or 20 years.
I think we shall maybe suggest another session, because this is a wonderful topic, between being compliant, the governance, which is, risk mitigation, and how we can avoid them. And on the other side, I mean, the static that it brings along with organizations. So I think that this is a wonderful topic to continue the discussion at another time. I mean, Paul, thank you so much for your insights, and I think that most of us we will listen to it several times because you place several gems in all your answers. And I mean, from my side, I mean, thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure
It was
indeed.
a wonderful conversation. And if I really have to rephrase some of the learnings over the last half an hour, I would say embrace change, be aware that you have to give up something, also to gain something. And yeah, and think about it that we have to collaborate, think about ecosystems because the change is so rapid around us. So be dynamic in order to be able to survive in the future. And I think that is what I get out of it. And it's a very nice message, I think. So thanks for sharing that.
No, thank you both for doing a sum up. I mean, it's been fun for me to think about it, think it through, how I'd want to try and explain it. Just a fun couple of things before I go is I'm doing actually a reverse engineering of ecosystems, which is getting to be very interesting for me because it realizes every ecosystem has a trigger point, an aha moment, you know. And when you start reverse engineering, you actually begin to see those trigger moments, and then you begin to actually understand what is a universal application component within ecosystem and what is a specific key component that makes that particular ecosystem work or not work. And I'm finding that to be fun as a topic of exploring at this moment of time. But hey, another day.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, thank you so much, everyone. And to our listeners, if you have additional questions, please feel free to post below your question, and Paul will answer them, maybe also in the comment, so that everyone can benefit from it. I mean, thank you also again, also for the links you are going to share. And Bob and I will be thinking about what is the next chapter, right? So thank you, everyone, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.